Every year, hundreds of people walk into a place scientists call the death zone. Above 8,000 meters on Everest, there's not enough oxygen to keep a human body alive for long. Wounds stop healing up there. Thoughts start slipping. Some people walk through it like they're taking a stroll. They summit, they turn around, and a few hours later they're drinking tea at base camp. Others collapse in the snow a few hundred meters from where the first group just walked past, and they don't get back up. We used to think the difference was willpower. It isn't. The real answer is sitting inside the DNA of some people and not others. And it came from a species so mysterious we didn't even know what their face looked like until very, very recently. So, what actually decides who survives up there and who doesn't? And how is the answer connected to a species that vanished 40,000 years before anyone climbed a mountain for fun? It starts with something almost too small to matter: a single bone, no bigger than a fingernail. 2008, Siberia. Inside a cave in the Altai Mountains, Russian archaeologists Anatoly Derevyanko and Mikhail Shunkov are excavating through freezing dirt undisturbed for tens of thousands of years. They find a fragment of finger bone, small enough to lose in a pocket. It gets shipped to a lab in Leipzig, Germany, to a geneticist named Svante Piebo, one of the only people on Earth who'd figured out how to pull readable DNA out of bones this old. His team runs the sample through comparison after comparison, checking it against every cataloged human lineage on record. Every result comes back the same way: no match. By 2010, the picture is undeniable. This DNA doesn't match anything in the database. Not Neanderthal, not modern human, nothing anyone had ever recorded. They named the species Denisovan after the cave. Later analysis shows the bone belonged to a girl, 5 to 7 years old. Somewhere in that string of genetic letters was a rule that decades later would decide who walks off a mountain alive. In 2014, geneticists Rasmus Nielsen and Emilia Huerta Sanchez compared the DNA of Tibetan Highlanders to people at sea level, chasing a gene called EPAS1, known to control how the body handles low oxygen. What they found didn't look like anything in the modern human gene pool. It matched the Denisovan genome almost exactly. Here's why that matters. When most bodies hit extreme altitude, they panic in a specific way. Oxygen drops, so the body pumps out a hormone that tells bone marrow to make more red blood cells. That sounds like help. It's a trap. More red blood cells means thicker blood, and thicker blood is harder for a struggling heart to move. At extreme altitude, that spiral is exactly what kills people. That's when the headaches start, the confusion, fluid creeping into the lungs and the brain, swelling tissue that has nowhere to expand. It's the same chain reaction that turns a strong, experienced climber into a body a rescue team has to carry down, if a rescue team can even reach them in time. The Denisovan version of EPAS1 blunts that panic response almost entirely. The Sherpa people of Nepal are genetically an offshoot of the Tibetan population, and they carry that same variant. Researchers measured it directly. At 3,440 meters, Sherpa hormone levels looked the same as those of lowlanders standing at just 1,300 meters. Their bodies weren't sounding the alarm. A 2008 study in the British Medical Journal, led by anesthesiologist Paul Firth, analyzed nearly 200 deaths across 80 years of Everest climbing records. During descent on the standard routes, the death rate for climbers was 2.7%. For Sherpas, it was 0.4%. Genes don't summit mountains by themselves. Skill does the climbing. But biology decides how much room for error your body gives you when something goes wrong at 8,000 meters. Back in that same Siberian cave in 2012, archaeologists pulled out another fragment from a pile of over 2,000 unidentifiable bone scraps. It looked like every other piece in that pile. Anonymous, easy to overlook. It sat unlabeled for years. When scientists finally sequenced it in 2018, they found something no human genome had ever shown before. Almost exactly half her DNA matched Neanderthal. The other half matched Denisovan. Her mother was a Neanderthal. Her father was a Denisovan. Somewhere in that cave system, around 90,000 years ago, two different species didn't just cross paths. They stayed together long enough to raise a child. Scientists named her Denny. She was at least 13 when she died. To this day, she's the only first-generation hybrid between two distinct human species ever found. And Denisovan DNA didn't stop working after they disappeared. In 2026, researchers at Yale mapped over 3,000 Denisovan inherited gene variants still active inside the immune systems of people across Oceania right now, still switching genes on and off in response to infection. Somewhere on the other side of the planet from that Siberian cave, invisible code from a species no one had ever seen was still doing its job. Nobody had a face to put to any of it. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If this species did all of that for us, why did it take 15 years just to find out what they looked like? Because for most of that time, there was nothing to look at. No skull. Just fragments and invisible code. Then, in June 2025, that changed. A massive, nearly complete skull had been sitting in China since 1933, uncovered by a laborer building a bridge in Harbin, hidden away for decades. When it finally surfaced, scientists couldn't classify it. In 2021, some proposed it was an entirely new species and nicknamed it Dragon Man. The skull alone is 23 centimeters long, more than 15 centimeters wide, with room inside for a brain roughly the size of yours. It belonged to a man in his 50s with a heavy brow ridge and a wide nose built to warm, brutally cold air before it ever reached his lungs. They were wrong about the new species part. A team led by geneticist Qiao Fu extracted ancient proteins, then mitochondrial DNA, from plaques still clinging to the skull's teeth. Published in Science and Cell, the results confirmed it. Dragon Man was a Denisovan, the first skull ever linked to them with genetic confidence. After 15 years of fragments and invisible signatures, scientists could finally look at something resembling a face. So, somewhere above 8,000 meters, two people can be standing in the same spot. Same wind, same cold, same lack of oxygen. And one of them isn't facing that mountain alone. Buried in their blood is a piece of another human species. One that had no name until 2010. No face until 2025. And no idea, 40,000 years ago, that a fragment of themselves would still be standing on a mountain, deciding who gets to walk back down. A species that had children with its closest cousins in the same valley where its own bones would one day be dug out of the frozen ground. A species whose face stayed hidden in a well in China for most of a century, while pieces of its blood kept climbing mountains it never got the chance to see. For 15 years, we knew this species only as a rule written into our own bodies, with no one to attach it to. Now, we know it had a mother, a father, a face, and somewhere on a mountain right now, it still has a pulse. If you want to know what happened to the other lost humans still hiding in our own DNA, subscribe to my channel, because Denny and Dragon Man weren't the only secrets that Cave was keeping.